Right, we're live,
Thank
Mr. Chair.
you. Thank you. Well, good evening, councillors and members of the public and our acting town clerk. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting of the Planning, Environment and Services Committee. Item 2, to receive apologies for absence.
Councillor Claire Wildey, which is why Councillor Hopkins is substituting for her this evening.
And I've got Councillor Boynton. He's apologised as well. Just before we go any further, I'll just hand over to Matt, Deputy.
I'll just to go through the introduction and explain that we're meeting remotely as of the 6th of May. As of the 6th of May, the emergency Coronavirus Act allowed councils to meet and make resolutions via remote technology. Unfortunately, that wasn't continued, but this council resolved before that, when they could make decisions remotely, for the acting town clerk to be delegated to lawfully make decisions on behalf of the council. All decisions that I make as acting town clerk are based on the recommendations from the committee meetings, with any issues that we feel are more important that need a definite resolution going to full council, which does meet in person off-site. And just to clarify, if anybody is watching and are used to it being the Planning, Property and Services Committee, at the last meeting of full council, the scheme of delegation was revised to change the title of the committee to Planning and Environment and Services Committee, to better reflect the nature of the work the committee looks at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alison was in and gone out. She did. She's here. There we are. Good evening, Alison. We've started. We're live streaming. Okay. Can you hear me, Alison?
I can, thank you. Sorry, I'm a bit late.
Oh, you're all right. Right then, item 3 and 3A, to record declarations of interest by any member of the council in respect of the agenda items listed below. Members declaring interest should identify the agenda items and type of interest being declared. None. 3B, then, to note dispensations to any member of the council in respect of the agenda items below. And then item 4, to note the minutes of the Planning, Property and Services meeting held on the 7th of September, previously circulated and agreed at full council on the 20th of September. Note them, thank you. And item 5, to note the delegated responses that Matt and myself looked at, which you've all had copies of. Yeah. Item 6 then, planning applications. First one, 14 St Giles Croft, erection of a single-storey extension to the rear following the demolition of existing conservatory. No objection.
Agreed.
Land north of Minster Way, Woodmansea, erection of 72 dwellings. This is phase 2A, with associated access, parking and infrastructure following the approved application. All matters to be considered. Now, obviously, hello, David.
Well, this is a big one, but there are 3 things on it which I think definitely affect people in Beverley, as well as the people who are going to be living on the site or very close to it. And they are all things that haven't been decided but should have been decided. The first one is drainage and flooding. Now, there is no way that any site, but certainly that any low-lying site, should be passed at this time without at least the basic outline of how you're dealing with drainage being settled. So that's the first thing. The second thing is rights of way. There are rights of way which cross through this site, and they are indicated only as an approximate route on the plan, but they must be indicated as an exact route, because otherwise you have rows with people suddenly discovering that a footpath crosses their garden, or even a road. The third thing is the actual nature of the houses, which I'm inclined not to really dispute over, though I can understand that the planning committee, that the planners are not very happy. But when it comes to affordable homes, only 7% only 7 of the homes, sorry, on this site are going to be affordable homes, but they are not the right size. And the ones which say that they are for 3 people would actually have trouble accommodating 2.
Yeah.
So I think all of those issues, which are mentioned by the officers, we should actually say that until those are settled to the officer's satisfaction, the plan should not be accepted.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. Well said. I can't add any further to that. You've covered most of what I was going to say, apart from the obvious, which is the flooding. Ian, you've got your hand up.
Just that it's architects playing fast and loose with the planning regs, to be honest. That's all it is. It's a cynical manipulation of that in terms of the affordable housing rules, etc., etc. It's I'm all for people putting small we had one at the last meeting off Swinemore Lane, a very small one single piece of affordable housing, but this is 72 properties. It's quite a big development, and I think I don't think I'm not inclined to support it.
No. So, Matt, have you got a way of words for us ready, or?
No, I've not got the exact wording, but I've taken notes of the points raised. I mean, when it comes to drainage, yeah, the latest thing from the on the actual planning portal is the land drainage team note the submitted flood risk and drainage strategy and await full drainage details to be submitted. So, with as Councillor Horsley says, without that information, this council may be remiss to approve it, knowing that information wasn't available at the time. Given the fact that I've actually added an extension on this application for our comment until Thursday, means that the deadline should have been last week. Therefore, the information isn't there by the deadline for us to make a comment. So I can make reference to that, reference to the rights of way and the need for them to be exact so as not to encounter future complications with the sort of examples Councillor Horsley gave. And concerns regarding not only the quantity of the affordable housing, but the nature of that quantity as well. What I could do is wrap that up in wording if councillors are happy, and then I'll email you all tomorrow morning with it, so you can see if you're satisfied. As I say, I've got till Thursday to submit it with the extension, so I'll do it tomorrow morning and email it with those sentiments if they're the sentiments of this committee.
David Tucker.
A point of general interest relating to David's extremely good points about rights of way. I believe the government is currently planning legislation that any rights of way which are not formally recorded, and from the top of my head, I think it's about 2030, will no longer be rights of way. So there is a case now for making sure that our rights of way are properly recorded before that kicks in.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Councillor.
Okay, then, do we agree with Matt's actions then?
Agreed.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil. 18 Woodlands, Beverley, erection of a single-storey extension to the rear and the officers are recommending that we have no objection. Is that agreed? Agreed? Yeah. 42 Wharton Ave, change of use of land to domestic garden and erection of a fence to the side boundary, including replacement of gates following removal of existing edges. We have no objection to that.
Is that your turf, Peter?
Pardon?
Is that your turf?
Anywhere near you?
Is it-
No. It's across. I have a rough idea where it is, off Wharton. Yeah. Are we no objections? No.
No objection.
4 Goths Lane, erection of first floor, extension to side, pitched roof, porch to the front. And with no objections. No. 29 U begin. Now this is in the Westwood Conservation Area. Copper beech tree due to poor condition, that's to be felled, of the tree, dieback and damage to branches where they cross over. And you can see in there, yeah, I've got you, David. Beverley Town Council has no objection to this application on condition that the work is carried out at a time that has been least negative impact to wildlife, and that 2 new suitable trees are planted to compensate for the loss of the felled tree. If it is not possible to do this, to do so on site, the Town Council encourages the applicant to liaise with East Riding Tree Officer to provide 2 trees to be planted elsewhere. David Tucker.
It's a question really, Chair, and that is the determination of a tree being in poor condition. Is that determined by the applicant, in which case anybody could say I've got a tree in a poor condition? Or is there some verification by the East Riding that they agree with that determination?
I would suggest, with it being in a conservation area, you just can't, obviously, as you all know, you just can't do what you want with property, and that includes trees. And I would suggest that they probably had East Riding Tree Officer around, and they've indicated to the applicant that this would be the way forward in view of what the tree officers found.
My only point on that one might be a question, you know, we would approve this on the assumption that this has taken place, but, you know, we'd want verification that the tree officer has seen it, because this, I know this tree, it's a very significant tree.
The tree officers are very very conscious, and they are very rigorous about going around and checking. They do want to make sure that trees aren't felled for any reason other than they're genuinely in need of felling.
Yeah. Ian, is that okay, David? The answer?
Yes, that's fine. I mean, it's like all of these things, isn't it? That you assume the job's being done properly at the East Riding end. That's quite a big assumption.
Yeah, I appreciate what Councillor Tucker's saying, because when we see them, it may still be wait on the application on the system and consider them. It may still be waiting for the tree officer in the case of this application to actually go there, whereas some have already been. Again, things sometimes cross.
On the paperwork, there's it suggests that they've had a private consultant round, but of course, private consultants effectively are paid. And although I'm not casting aspersions over this particular private consultant, sometimes consultants' opinions can be bought. There's nothing in the paperwork. I've just had a quick look that it suggests that the East Riding officer has looked at it. So
there is quite a bit of evidence going on at the moment, certainly down south at Sandbach, of people who are poisoning trees deliberately in order to improve their views. You know, so it's not beyond people to say this tree is unsafe. You know, let's get rid of it.
Yeah. Can we say subject to the opinion of the tree officer? and that covers us if he has not yet given that opinion.
Yeah, that's very much like we do with some applicants. Some applicants, we give approval on the condition that the conservation officer's concerns are positively addressed.
Yep.
I can't hear you, Chloe. Could you just say again?
So I was just going to say that I was agreeing with David's suggestion, but it looked like you were talking, so I just wasn't sure if you knew you were on mute.
Thank you. So is that agreed? Then we go down that line, right? Highgate Dental Practice, 17 Wednesday Market. Installation of a non-illuminated hanging sign and installation of a internal illuminated fascia sign. With no objection to that. Is that agreed? Yeah. Fillmore and Union, 31 Saturday Market. Display.
Mr. Chair, just to point on the previous application, that is a very well photographed line, isn't it? And Matt, I suppose you can agree with me on that. The view down Highgate. Is it going to be, it's a very, very Beverley, that shot of down towards the Monk's Walk, towards the Minster. I just wondered how the illuminated side is going to impinge on that.
Hopefully
it's non-illuminated. It's non-illuminated sign.
No, there's two.
The internal sign is illuminated, but it's a very faint illumination. And the civic society's comment on it was that they didn't have concern because it's a very faint illumination on the inside. But I appreciate what Councillor Gow's saying.
Yeah.
If something was too illuminated down there, it would spoil a treasured view.
Yeah. Okay. Okie dokie. Right, then back to Fillmore and Union, 31 Saturday Market. Display of a non-illuminated individual acrylic letters. And this is a retrospective application. Now, what the Matt is recommending to us, that his suggested response is that we have no objection to this application itself, but express its disappointment yet again that a town centre business has carried out work and then decided to apply planning permission. And I think we need to get the message across to all businesses that this has got to be followed through the correct procedure. And you know, I mean, yeah. So do we agree with what Matt is saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Chloe?
Mr. Chair, I think it's worth really echoing the comments that the Civic Society have put in. Again, they've also expressed concern about the retrospective action and everything.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, the effect, because of Saturday Market being such a significant part of the Beverley persona. It's a shame that these kind of things don't go through a proper process beforehand and end up being done retrospectively.
I can beef that one up a bit, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Okay, do we all agree with that? Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you. 16 Westwood Way, tree preservation order, Beverley number 36, 2006, reference 996, Westwood area conservation, and it's to crown reduce 3 number holly trees by 2, 4 and 3 meters, and crown and thin by 15%, and shape due to no works being carried out on these trees in 15 years. Yeah. Do we agree with that? Okay.
Agreed.
And obviously, that the work be carried out with no negative impact to wildlife. Okay.
Good.
And again, 16 woodlands, erection of a single-story extension to the rear with a roof terrace and rear dormer replacement and construction of a new boundary wall. We recommendation is from Matt. The response suggested is that Beverley Town Council has no objections to this application, as the proposal has been designed in conjunction with an application for the neighbouring property, and this indicates both parties, the adjoining part and the adjoining parties, happy with this submission.
I don't just need to tidy that up, but I've got too many parties in that last
Well, you have.
I don't know if anyone else thought this when they looked at it, but it was, until you saw in small lettering,
Yeah.
it was in conjunction, it was quite confusing because it was detailing the next door neighbour, but it did make sense with that small bit of lettering we had on there.
Ian?
Oh, we've just approved number 16, haven't we, next door?
Yeah.
So I guess they're in partnership. Oh, have you broken it, Matt?
I'm not doing that.
Huh?
Sorry, I think someone's on it by accident. I think that's
Very strange. Let's press on.
that's all right. I think I went back. I think someone pressed something by mistake. I've sorted that out. I've locked it down.
All right. Okie dokie. We in agreement? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Item 7 then, skate park to receive a long-awaited report from Matt regarding the consultation held by Airbus on Friday the 13th of August. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I apologise, everybody. Delightful council. I'm going to be talking a lot tonight. I've got lots of things to report back. The skate park. So Airbus carried out the consultation, and quite a number of young people took part. A lot of their comments were regarding the sort of equipment, specific terms they'd like to see. So they wanted benches, rigger ramps, and other words that didn't make any sense to me, but make sense to the skating fraternity. So the young people are very much engaged with it through Airvas. Interestingly, some of the things that they've highlighted, one of them suggested cameras, so see if security cameras could be part of the system. The lights currently don't work on site because, from what I can gather, the previous council had them permanently switched off because it was attracting antisocial behaviour late at night because they were on till quite late. So we maybe need to look at reviewing that. What's important is that the young people know that the town council is very keen on developing this. Part of their ideas regarding benches and bins could be integrated within the design of it. So rather than having a bin that's freestanding, it could be within the actual structure with a ramp over it with a door front. So there's various ways to actually integrate things within it that they're required, that they've put on the wish list. I met with Airvas a couple of Mondays ago. They're very keen to continue working with us on this. They started going to the skate park much more frequently, talking to the young people, and as we said in the previous meeting, the idea of it being more like an open air drop-in centre as well, to give it more of a purpose than simply for the skaters. One of the big questions that does keep coming up, and another council have questioned, is the site, the footprint of the footprint of the site, which East Riding don't want to extend, but it could be when we get it redeveloped, designed in such a way that if there was ever the possibility of extension, there are natural ways to extend it, a little bit like a hamster's rotor stack system, rather than having to rebuild. So we'd ask anyone to consider that if it came in the future. I have had a report from East Ridings. A member of the public has reported suspicions of drug abuse on the skate park, but with no real evidence. I've asked the police to go down to have a look there. The East Riding youth workers, they've seen no evidence of this whatsoever, and the young people haven't either. The chap from JB Rural who cleans it twice a week, empties the bins, he's told me that he's used to, on other sites in other areas where he works, not in Beverley, seeing the remains of drug paraphernalia. He's not seen any of that. To him, there's no evidence either. So it's looking quite positive. And the more it's used, the more the youth workers from Airbus go down there, the more it distracts away from antisocial behaviour. Of course, the perception of antisocial behaviour might just be 3 young people sat there, so people assume the worst. I also attended an online meeting with various youth services from across the county, led by Airbus, with some of the groups were independent. There's a lot of similar ideas in other towns regarding skate parks and redevelopment. And Withens in particular has got a really strong worker there who's doing some really creative stuff to get young people involved with it and things like that. So we've agreed that I'm going to liaise with them. And I've got a meeting on Thursday morning to look at what they did to see how maybe 2 or 3 areas could link up. It might be there's more chance of 2 or 3 towns getting larger funding together for the areas rather than doing it independently. So it's quite exciting that there could be a wider approach that we could be part of. Now that we have allocated £71,000 through reserves, it gives a good amount to match fund with external funders. And as I say, there might be a stronger case with a wider basis. Because one of these things East Riding has is a few towns surrounded by mass areas of quite isolated rurality. So we may be able to dip into funding that helps bridge those gaps. So the next step is that meeting. Then over the winter, spring, to get 3 companies to provide quotes, because then we'll know the sort of prices we're talking about for external funding, to write the external funding bids. Once we're successful in gaining all the funding, we'll select a company to carry out the work, and that's when they'll work more with the young people as well to really develop and fine-tune the look of the site and the equipment on the site and the design. I think councillors need to be aware that talking with all the people who've been doing this in other areas, this can be quite a lengthy process. It could be 1.5 to 2 years for completion. These things don't happen quickly. But I think by working with these other people who've already done it, know how to get the engagement, and the engagement helps you get the funding. I've also got links to contact 2 officers in Lou Adams' team. For those of you who don't know Lou Adams, she is based East Riding in play and sports, and they've got lots of access routes into this sort of funding. So I just want to report all this about that things are progressing, and we are continuing to move with this, and hopefully we'll be able to keep reporting back more practical stuff. The next thing that's definitely going to happen at the skate park is that Airbus are going to quite literally whitewash it and then work with the young people and a professional street artist to put new street art on the skate park to give their identity to it. And I think just by that, and I'm also looking into an alternative bin, that shows that they're starting to take more of an ownership of it, and Airbus are playing a key part in that because it helps fulfil their aims, and they know what they're doing with this as well when it comes to young people in consultation. So it's also like going ahead quite steadily, but it's going ahead.
Thank you very much, Matt, for that report. It's very, very positive indeed. And could you thank Airbus on behalf of certainly myself and the rest of the committee for the sterling work that they've done so far, and may they continue to carry out more positive work for the town in conjunction with ourselves. Anne, and then Ian.
Can we thank Matt for his hard work? And he sounds so much more positive. I began to despair that we'd ever get the skate park. But even if it takes years, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's very positive.
We've been through these meetings. I know it's working in other places, and rather than reinvent the wheel, they're almost evangelical about it. So it's not a matter of copying them; they want to help us.
Yeah, good.
Ian,
can we keep it on the agenda, or keep it, to keep it fresh, because there is so much work gone on, and I know Councillor Estelle is still planning on making a late bid for the next Olympics, so it would be nice to get it sorted. But
Yeah.
I credit to Councillor Estelle for keeping this as a hot item. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Thank
keep
you.
it, we can keep it on the agenda permanently, and then if there's nothing
Yeah.
to report that month, there's
Yeah.
nothing to report, but it just means it's always there.
Yeah.
If you would. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, colleagues. Right. So that's dealt with item 7. Item 8, then meeting with Paul Palmer. He's a project manager, grounds and forestry. Update from Matt.
Yeah, it was nice to catch up with Paul Palmer. It was one of my first actual face-to-face meetings where someone their head isn't in a box on a computer screen. For those of you who don't know, Paul has worked in that department for years, and he's always been very supportive of Beverley, and Beverley's got a great relationship with Paul. But like with so many sections of East Riding Yorkshire Council, his budget over the years has been depleted. His staffing figures in his team, as people have retired, that to me, that dreadful term natural wastage, and people haven't been replaced. So he's got more and more to do with less money, less people, but he's doing his best. So with the Swinemo History Garden, where we're at this point is, Paul's confirmed that there's no issue with his team going in there, stripping it, sorting it all out, getting it tidied up for any work. I've emailed Jeff Mann, who's the East Riding's Housing and Safe Communities Group Manager, because this is housing land for this project. He's liaising with, he's told me he's going to liaise with Bill Rowntree, who's more in charge, more senior, in terms of how to move this forwards, as to whether it would be leasing it to the town council or gifting it to the town council. But I'll report back when I've heard back from Bill Rowntree. So that's the key to it: getting the land sorted, then move forward. I'll just break after each one in case there's any questions about any of them, Mr. Chair.
No, that's brilliant, Matt. It's moving forward now, more positive than ever. Thank you for that.
Mud Hills play area. Paul said he's got £60,000 for play equipment, but historically, as some council will be aware, there's always been antisocial behaviour there and damage to the equipment. Not so much the play area at Salmon Road shops. And me and Paul were talking about the idea that that is so open that everyone can see it, whereas Mud Hills is tucked away a bit, so it's not as obvious. The mugger is used but doesn't receive any damage. It's always the play equipment. I've contacted Joe at Cherry Tree Centre, because whilst there's Airvas of youth workers, Cherry Tree, as we partly funded through our partnership, our grant scheme, our partner grant, funding for them to develop their work with young people, and that's in their area. So Joe's going to see if their workers can go out there and talk to the youngsters to form, relationships with them and start to engage. I've also emailed Alan Frankish, suggesting that potentially one of the new CCTV cameras we've got might be of use in the area, because if that's on that patch overlooking that area, it creates the idea of a sense of security for families who want to use it, and may hopefully detract away from antisocial behaviour. So that's where that is at the moment. I know Councillor Johnson, perhaps more with East Riding, had a meeting there with Councillor Matthews, the portfolio holder, to look at the area, and Joe joined them at that. So we know that Joe's very invested in that.
Thank you.
That kind of connects with the next one, the benches on Queen Elizabeth Field. I think it's called Queen Elizabeth Field, isn't it, Pete? Behind it, because there's been the desire for council to look at some benches there. I discussed this with Paul, and he says he doesn't object in principle, but his advice is that first it needs to be addressed. We need to address the antisocial behaviour and the vandalism, and get that sorted, and the young people working with youth workers first. In his experience, they've tried a bench there before, but within a very short amount of time, it'd been yanked out of the ground, dragged into the play area, and damaged beyond repair. So the suggestion is a phased approach, positively address the issues that are happening there with Cherry Tree and hopefully CCTV, then upgrade the play area, and once that's done, look at benches as almost like the cherries on the cake around the field. There's also you've got to be quite delicate, because he said that there may have to be consultation, because there's residents around there. So rather than just putting them there, so there needs to be close enough for people to use, but far enough away that they're not going to cause residents any issues. So it's not a no. It's looking at doing it at the right time within the wider scheme of issues there.
Great, Matt. Ian.
I think we should go with everything he says. The gentleman does it all every day in, day out. and we should be guided by his advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Finally,
We have got a good working relationship with East Riding officers, albeit at Paul's level, but more or less what Paul says, he's talking on behalf of East Riding, and he can make things happen. So, yeah, the relationship has always been good with Paul. Me and him go back years and years, because he used to attend the Beverley and Blue meetings and what have you. So I see Matt nodding his head with that one. So yeah.
I got the impression he doesn't want us to waste our money by doing something that's great, but in the wrong order. And it's not demonising the kids or demonising the area. It's just addressing some of the problems there, ironing them out, and making sure that everything works well.
Yeah.
And the final one, Mr. Chair, is the Tommy planters. If members remember the last meeting, the wooden planters built by Royal British Legion, they have the figure of the Tommy on the front. He's got no Paul had no problem with these being located in the Jubilee Garden on the new Walkergate Railway Street corner, although he said we'd have to weatherproof them, but they could, the idea that they could factor them in with their plant up, so the same plants that are in the beds there would be in there. Regarding Hengate, no problem in principle, but we did discuss the idea that they might look a bit lost because that's such a big garden and the cenotaph's so big. And exactly where would you put them? So it might be that we look at one in the Jubilee Garden, start off with, and see how it goes. There's plenty of space there. But if you could just wait for myself, Libby, and Carl to review all the finances, because we're going through that for policy and finance, so we know exactly how much we've got. But if we can afford it, if council are so minded, we could purchase one for Jubilee Garden.
Matt, though, we're now 5th of October today, and the 11th Remembrance Day is coming up fairly soon, just round the corner. So have we had chance to order one yet?
No, because as I'm just reported back, because it's to report back because we didn't know where we'd be able to put them. If council, if this committee approves to the purchase of perhaps two, because one on its own might look a little bit odd, but two next to each other, and if the finances are there, that could be the resolution of the council if the finances are available to purchase two and locate them in the garden. That way we can proceed with that.
Chloe, can't hear you.
Sorry, do we have a figure for how much the individual ones are, or how much two would be?
I think they're 180 something out there.
So for £400 would cover the two.
Oh yes, I mean that seems entirely reasonable to say. Will we have to look into delivery costs as well?
I think that'll include the delivery cost, the £400. It's under 500, so it's something that I can, as clerk, approve anyway. But I just wanted council this committee rather to look at it. It's something that Pete brought up.
Are we in agreement then?
Yeah, the treatment of it, I brought to attention at the last meeting. I think the required treatment.
Yeah. So we can ask JV Rural to we can get them delivered to the yard here and get JV Rural to treat them.
Yeah.
Okay then. Yeah. Thanks for that report, Matt. Meeting with Paul. 9, meeting with the Youth Offending Services. Again, over to you, Matt.
Yeah, we got an email from officers. Sian is one of the officers at the Youth Offending team, and they used to have a bit of an allotment plot, and now everyone's getting back out there from COVID, wanting to provide opportunities for some of the young offenders in rehabilitation, etc. So what we've done is there is a large plot directly through the main gates of Spark Mill to the left, which was Beverley and Blooms, but they no longer require it. It's become overgrown. It's got 2 polytunnels in there. What we've agreed is that they can use. We've given them the key. They signed a contract. They're gonna use that plot because the council's always earmarked that for community use. They're going to be getting some offices at Flemingate, so they'll be able to store all their equipment there. Whenever any of the teams come out, they'll always have supervision, and they believe it will be a really good activity for the young people. They may even go on to making things like hedgehog hotels, bug hotels, things like that the town council could then put in other locations. They may grow some of their own plants that we could then put in planters. So it's really at the start, and I took in my capacity as acting clerk with the operational side to approve this because it's a patch of land that needs something doing to it. Here's a great organisation where it will make a really positive impact to the people involved. There's still the other group who are developing another patch over, which need to liaise with for use with special educational needs and disabilities. So this is separate to that, but we think it's a really good use of that land, which will have positive outcomes for everyone concerned.
Absolutely brilliant, Matt. So just to clarify, they're paying the normal rent, and we is that correct, or are we just letting them have the use of it, and also on the understanding that they can use them polytunnels, but they are Beverley Town Council's property?
Yeah, they particularly liked it because of the polytunnels, because they can do stuff in there. Yeah, they won't be charged a fee because they're a charity, so it's more charitable aims. So they won't be charged, but they signed a contract, and we've seen copies of all their health and safety and safeguarding. So we're satisfied with that.
Thanking you, Ian.
That's the point I was going to raise. I mean, those that know, I was in youth justice for 20 odd years. And it will be risk assessed down to the ground. It will be reflective jackets, and it will be appropriately staffed, usually by permanent employees and by volunteers who manage the situation. But people and other people who are using the allotment shouldn't have any concerns that we're going to have convicted offenders running willy-nilly, because it won't be like that at all, I can assure you.
Thank you. So do we agree with that, Chloe?
I was just going to say, I think this is an excellent idea, and particularly I just wanted to ask Matt about what you raised about they might be making things to put elsewhere, and I think that sounds really positive. But also, can we perhaps have that as a future item to kind of follow up on? Obviously, not every meeting, but something just so that it remains in our mind, because it's an excellent way to try and bring people back into doing something for the community.
Yeah. They're still in the infancy, because they've only just got it, so they've got to weed it and everything first. But my initial thought was that when I was in York a few weeks ago, some of the planters just have a bug hotel or a bee hotel in them, and the idea that they could make these sorts of things, then we could put. I mentioned it to Paul Palmer, and he would have no objection as long as we tell them where they are. Even some of the little gardens that the East Riding manage, for them to go in to doing those sort of areas. It could be where they proposed where those Tommy planters are. There's we're proposing Jubilee Garden. There's a wall there would be for other planters. It depends what their budget is and how well they get on. But no, I can report back, and I'm sure that Sean or one of the other officers, once this is going in a few months' time, would look back and give us an update themselves.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. Very, very well said. Also, Matt, as this youth offending services progress with that, and you get a clearer picture of what they are able to make, and following on from what you said about bug hotels and that, it might well be that they would like to liaise with the allotment shop, because they might have an outlet there for the allotment shop to sell, because I do know there's a big influx of that type of person on the allotments that would go for such an idea of bug hotels. And incidentally, while we're talking about bug hotels, has any of you been and looked at what the In Bloom ladies and gentlemen are doing? Have you seen it at the railway station? There's two
Yeah.
massive bug hotels. They've really tidied that piece of land up, which faced the old allotment shop, and it looks absolutely terrific. I just thought I'd put that one in. Thank you. Lord Roberts Road. Oh no, 10. Not ready for you yet, David. 10 allotment updates. To receive updates from acting clerk. Have you got anything to report on any of them?
Got a few updates, so people are aware with the waiting list now, where within residents within inside the boundary of the town council, we've got 53 on the waiting list. 15 of those already have half a plot. They're wanting another half, so there's 44 on the waiting list in total. In the past month, 2 allotments have been reallocated, but again, it shows how low the turnover is at times. Heritage Open Day, that was very successful. Lots of allotment tenants were there. Over 100 people went on the Sunday to look at it, and the Civic Society thanked the town council for the work we did there. We put posters up and promoted it, etc. The compost toilet is one thing. I just need a final okay from the committee if they're okay with it. The plot, I think it's 22, the little community plot. This has been an ongoing thing. They've got the composting toilet, it's constructed, they have their own insurance in place, they've got the cleaning rotor in place, it's keypad, number keypad, so only people that on the allotments who ask for it can be given it. Is this committee happy for them to fully start using it now properly?
Thank you. I would agree that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Can I just put you down as proposing that, Pete? I think the first thumb up I saw was Anne's giving thumbs up to that. So Anne's seconding. Right, Revolution. They had that's a charity. There's a hell of a lot of good work. They've recently acquired quite a lot of funding and more staff, but they're refocusing what they do. They did have a large plot on the Queensgate site, directly next to the main gates, on the left of the main gates from Queensgate. They no longer require it, so they've vacated the site. They've removed their portaloo, they've removed their large shed. However, there's a big concrete cement flagstone base. We've asked them to remove that, which they're going to do, because it shouldn't be our cost, but it needs removing. Therefore, that site will enable be able to quartered up to make 4 allotment plots.
Oh, good.
So once that's done, we'll have 4 more to give out to the waiting list.
Yeah, Matt, just whereabouts is the concrete base situated, please?
It's if you went through the main gate on Queensgate, it's the plots directly to your left, and it's beneath the big tree.
So is it near the back fence?
Yeah, and it's half the size of this office, and it's flagstoned, and it's cement underneath. So it can't just be dug up. It needs proper people to come and get rid of it, and that's what they'll have to do, because they've got to put it back to, because we rent that allotment land, so it's got to go back to its use of
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So that's that one. The allotment wall repairs. The old wall running down the side of Kitchen Lane is in need of some repair. Rather than try and second guess it, I'm going to liaise with East Riding conservation officers to see if someone can come down and look at it with me to advise what sort of work. This is the only structure that we have like it. So East Riding have more of them around the county. So they'll have specialists on the list that we can maybe work with to look at that sort of that. Skip removal. We've got to be good neighbours, and people in lockdown have been still working from home, and some residents down there have complained about the fact that they look out the window and see this white skip all the time in the compound. I've had it removed because it only cost 180 quid rent for the year. It's not being used anymore because the handyman used it to dispose of waste. If there's any waste we need disposing now, JB will take it away off site with them. So it was no longer required. If we ever needed a skip, we could get one in temporarily, but in the spirit of good neighbourliness, that's been removed because it wasn't being used and it was there in front of them. So we could just skip good neighbours.
Well done.
Well done, yeah.
Taps, to update you on taps, we need to replace all allotment taps. We need to budget for this. Currently, some are a bit leaky, but more importantly, people attach hoses to them. They're screw taps. What we need to do is replace them all with automatic release valves, so they can't just be left on, with flat spouts, so you can't screw anything onto them. But with longer spouts, so people can put watering cans at the bottom to be filled. So JB Rural are researching quotes for us on the taps, and it's something we may have to budget for next year to replace all the taps across our sites to make them more water efficient.
Great.
Yeah.
Are you agreed on that? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a must, so we have to do it. So yeah. Trees on Spark Mill.
Again, if you walk into the Spark Mill site for the main entrance, it runs along all the way from the left hand side up to the drain at the end. A resident had cut some back. We contacted them to say, why did you cut them back? We didn't give permission, and they showed us some photographs, and the berries are really causing an issue in their gardens. The berries are dropping down, creating a hell of a lot of mess. So again, in the spirit of good neighbourliness, I've instructed JB Rural to program in for their winter schedule to cut them back. They are growing over. They are creating shadowing issues, but more importantly, it is damaging people's property. So we'll look at having those all levelled off over the winter months.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Any more comments? No. Number 11 then, Lord Roberts Road toilets, to receive any updates if there is any. David.
Just to sort of refresh people's memories, really, although it's a frustrating story, we know that we have had meetings with Alan Menzies eventually, and we've had discussions with East Riding Council. The current Lord Roberts toilets clearly not fit for purpose. The council will not replace them on that site. The indications we've got from the lawyers in East Riding is that the piece of garden opposite the theatre is a possibility, and Alan certainly seemed quite open to the possibility of that being a site for a new set of toilets, and that was quite exciting. I have asked repeatedly for a contact who I can liaise with in East Riding so that we can get these discussions going, and repeatedly I've been ignored. We don't have anybody that I can liaise with. My latest attempt to do it, an answer came back that Lord Roberts Road toilets were poorly used anyway. I personally requested the data for that, but there's nothing forthcoming, and whether there is any or not, it remains to be seen. My impression as a member of the public is that whenever I've been there, they seem to be pretty well utilised.
Yes.
I also think that I've been going clearly post-tourist season lately, and there's still a lot of people using it. The prime use, I think, will be when coaches, I know it is, when coaches drop off and people drop off and want to lose straight away. Talking continuously to tradesmen in Wednesday Market, they are very keen to have a set of toilets there. Again, going back and pushing this, and East Riding's line seems to be that there are conveniences in the treasure house. Now, the difficulty with that is exactly what we had at the meeting when it was pointed out that, okay, there are conveniences there. They don't open very early. They're not open on holidays and Sundays and things like that. They do close down very early. And so they're not readily available, not as available as the ones are now. And also, although it's only a small distance in terms of 100, 150 yards, it is an awkward distance to have to go around the corner and find them. And I think most people won't do that. So I think our position on it as a council should be that we do wish this to happen. The other piece of information we've got back is that it appears, and Matt will correct me if I'm wrong on this, we did have a discussion, Matt and I, a couple of days ago, and raised some thoughts together. It appears that because East Riding don't want to get involved in a rebuild, saying that there are toilets in the treasure house, that they might not want to be involved in that. We had hoped we could get involved, do it as a joint program, and then, you know, move from there to other facilities. So I think at the moment, my suggestion is that, and I didn't want to really do this, is that we just make a point as a council that this has to be a public facility. East Riding are choosing not to engage with us. And if I can get some quotations from probably Danfoss, which is a big company which does an awful lot of this, working with councils together, and just get an idea of how much that might cost us. But I do have a feeling we'll need to go it alone. We've got some money allocated in the budget for this possibility. I put in a request to Matt after the last town council meeting for a sum, whatever is available. I know it's not going to be as much as perhaps we thought previously, but my suggestion is that I go ahead and try and get some professional companies in to give us an idea of exactly what's involved, and then report back to council.
Chloe, sorry, Anne, Chloe, Ian.
Do you think if we made some publicity about it and people realise that the East Riding is not helping, it would be useful? And also the fact that it's in the treasure, if you get off that bus at the theatre and you're in a hurry,
Exactly.
some of us, you know, do get caught short. It's
Exactly.
a long way to go to the treasure house and find the toilets there. And
Exactly.
also, who knows they're there?
Exactly.
I know they're there because I'm a resident, but who else knows they're there? I think
Yes.
that's very, very reminiscent.
And currently, who knows when the treasure house is open?
Exactly, exactly.
Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've banged on about this one a bit, but I think, you know, when you're liaising, David, you could also make sure to stress to them that we're also looking at how much it would cost for them to be specifically changing places toilets, because I think if we are looking for new ones, we want them to be as inclusive as possible, basically.
Yeah. Well, it will be all singing and dancing. That's the logic behind David's thinking.
Yeah, that's certainly top of the priority list, Chloe, that we get something that, you know, covers everybody and all eventualities, and has medical facilities as well. But obviously the bigger it is, the all singing and dancing it is, the more it's going to cost us. So we've got some reality there. Going back to Anne's point, I mean, it is right, but I think we've been very professional, we've been very courteous, we've been very polite. And obviously this would need to go before full council, but I think we've got to a stage now where, you know, we've played our part, we've done our bit, we've given the arguments, so we're not being listened to. So we might need a completely different type of approach. And we might be saying, East Riding, this is what we pay our rates for, you know, get behind us and get supporting us.
Yeah, I would suggest it be listed from whole council, to be honest. That's the best thing we can do, and everybody sings from the same hymn sheet and decides an approach. And you know, we don't want to be trying to shame the East Riding Yorkshire Council. We want to try to get them to work in partnership.
Yes, but also, are we supposed to be encouraging tourists? Tourists need loos. I mean, even residents need loos, but you know, we're supposed to look after our tourists, and they need loos, and they need them where they need them, which is obviously right in the centre there.
Chloe. Can't hear you, Chloe.
I said, I believe they'll have missed this round of funding, but as a local authority, East Riding can actually apply to Changing Places for funding for a Changing Places toilet. So that might be something to raise with them. If it's not something that they have to pay for out of their own budget, but something that they could apply for. As I say, I think this year they'll have missed this year's round of funding. But I'm assuming there'll be another set next year that they can look into. And it's certainly something perhaps worth raising with them, because they might be a little bit more interested if it's not something where they've got to find money out of an existing budget to help. But I believe that we wouldn't be able to make that kind of application, but they would.
Correct. David.
Yeah, I think that before we take it to full council, we ought actually also to be aware of what the cost of manning the toilet would be, in terms of making sure that it can stay open for long hours, 7 days a week.
I think, David, I can answer that. David T has had a guy from British Toilets Association. He had him over, and the type of toilet accommodation that we're looking at is not what you normally see. No disrespect to East Riding anywhere. There's nowhere like it in this neck of the woods. And the idea of it would be there would be a small charge, but it would be open. Almost, I think, David, I'm right in thinking 24/7. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, part of it could well be doing that,
Yeah.
and that would be the hope and the aim. And also, to pick up on David's point, we certainly do not, in my opinion, want to be taking on this responsibility as a town council. This would be a subcontracted venture. So were anything to happen, David, and they needed maintaining, sorting out or whatever, it would be a telephone call to somebody to say, right, somebody over here straight away. And I gather that this works pretty effectively.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, the previous email from Alan Menzies' office makes it very, very clear that the Lord Roberts toilets as they are going. And as Councillor Tucker said, the Treasury House is the alternative, and they do appreciate better signage is needed, but that still doesn't address the issues of lack of access at times. It also wasn't clear in the emails, from an email I sent, whether or not they would still be happy for us as a town council to progress. So I've sent the following email today, following my conversation with Councillor Tucker, saying the town council fully appreciate that the closure of the toilets is not up for debate, but wonder if should the town council be able to source funding for new toilets to be built in Lord Roberts Road Garden, would this be something East Riding would object to on principle, or depending on the exact details and planning permissions, etc., would East Riding be open to the idea? Because it is their land, and it wasn't terribly committal either way. When we've been asking the question about, if we did it and got all the money and managed it, would you let us do it there? So that's one thing that we need to get clarification on as well. So I'll keep everyone up to date on that. The other thing to highlight is there was a working group set up to look into this. I can't remember off the top of my head which members were involved, but I could go back at that. I know it was Pete and David.
Myself, Chloe, Pete, and Duncan.
Because it would be more worthwhile, I think, that those four meeting to put together something to take to full council rather than just a town council wider discussion on it. Something that's a bit more focused going to full council either in October or November so there's something to kick around rather than just a general subject, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Ian?
I'm loath to mention the gentleman's name, but is it something we need to be accessing our local MP about?
I managed to do this successfully previously, and I think, although I'm loath to do it again, I think you're right, Ian. I think we're in a situation now where, were we to do that, I think we'd get a fair amount of support and we might get some movement in East Riding. I think it's the only way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Stewart is a very good constituency MP.
Yeah.
I shall leave it there because this is being recorded. Yeah, no, he has his uses, and I think he could be of great use to us in this particular campaign.
But that working group could just meet for an hour and put together a list of things to take to full council. One could be that this council writes to Graham Stewart MP, etc., that Councillor Tucker is investigating these costs, just so there's something more formal there the full council aware of, rather than just a debate about the issue, because everyone has an opinion on something like this, and we've got, I think my advice is that council needs to move past the idea of we want that to stay open, because those toilets are not staying open. The East Riding is quite certain on that. It's how to move it forwards in terms of replacing services one way or the other.
Yeah. Can I make a positive suggestion here as well? That this may be, rightly or wrongly, a good time that I think we should meet the leader of East Riding of Yorkshire Council.
Yeah.
Now, this committee does more practical work. Does this committee? It gets its. We get. That's why we've changed our name from PPS to Planning, Environment and Services. And I just am thinking, and let's just go back to the skate park. And Matt's touched on it tonight about. Yeah, there is a large piece of land which now is landlocked, as such. And I don't know whether you know that, Chloe, Alison, Anne, and David and Ian, and it's a nice size. Now, in the past, when we've mooted about wanting to extend, we've been told, no, you can't have that because that's going to be either A, a rugby pitch, or B, a football pitch. Well, I might say it's neither of those two would fit on that site. So that's one. I think we've got an even stronger case as well when we're talking about the toilets, where David and Matt and whoever, they've just been completely ignored. And I think all these things need to be brought to the attention of East Riding leader. And I think that this year will come back down to political will with East Riding. Now, the leader, Jonathan Owen, is new in post. I'm not saying that should have any bearing on it, but here we are. We're autonomous in our own right, but there's certain things which we seem to be stalling on. Whilst I'm on about it, stalling, a silly thing like flagpoles. Matt tells me if we don't spend the money that's been earmarked, we're going to lose it, and that's been ongoing now 2 years, and he still hasn't come back to me, hasn't John Reid. And I've been in touch again last week with Alan Menzies and spoke to his secretary Gillian, and she said, I'll get back to you. And here we are, middle of the week tomorrow, and still no comeback. We've had permission, but I just think that these sort of things need to be brought to the attention of the leader. And I saw David nodding his head. And part of that, the letter that goes from Matt to the leader, it could be that we have already had an interjection and support from our MP, Mr. Stewart, and still we're no further ahead.
I think that's a really good idea, Peter. And I think my suggestion would be that we don't just make it a 1-item agenda, we make it a 3-4 item agenda to demonstrate this is, a wide issue that we've got. And what exactly should the relationship be between a council, a leading council, and an important town council as well? At the moment, we've got nothing. It's just something that's got to be sorted out and addressed. It's not working for us, surely.
Matt, you're muted.
Hello, sorry, do we Norman Collier impression? Because that's not actually the agenda item, my suggestion is that I put that on full council. So full council can, because it's more than just the toilets issue. So it goes from full council. What I suspect that the leader may do is pass this to Councillor David Elvidge, who is now portfolio holder for liaising with town and parish councils. So it might be that we invite both of them to bridge that. But I think it's something that we need to take to full council on I think it's 25th of October. And if you're all right with that, Mr. Chair, I'll add that.
Yeah. I'll go along with your suggestion. It's your job to advise us, and I'll go with the advice that you give.
I think Councillor Tucker was quite right that if it's a short agenda of 3 or 4 significant issues that council can decide on when we write to them.
Yeah. Are you happy with that, David? Everybody? Yeah,
Yes.
Great. Right, item 12 then, to consider the exclusion of public from the meeting on the grounds that confidential information in relation to the well-being of staff and members of the public shall be disclosed. Public bodies.
Mr. Chair, before we go offline to the public, can I just commend the acting town clerk for everything that he's done on behalf of this committee?
Yes.
He's, you know, and he should be praised and receive acclaim far and wide for his efforts. It's very credible.
Yeah.
Well done, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, here. So the motion is that that the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that confidential information in relation to the well-being of staff and members of public shall be disclosed. Public Bodies Act, Admissions of Meetings Act 1960. Is that agreed?
Do you have a proposal, Mr. Chair?
I'll propose it.
And seconder, Councillor Gow.
Chloe.
Chloe. Right, Chloe for that. In that case, I will